Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us live for this latest NIHR Academy Development and Support webinar, Designing a Team Day. We've enabled Zoom's auto transcription for this webinar, and those who have downloaded Zoom, you'll see them automatically appear on your screen. If you prefer to turn them off, you can do that by clicking on the live transcription button and then pressing hide subtitle. For those of you that are viewing the webinar in a browser, you can turn captions on by clicking on the live transcription button and clicking show subtitle. If anyone needs any help or support to be able to do this, just drop me or a member of the team a message and we'll be able to support you to get that either switched on or off. If anybody wants a copy of the slides from today's webinar, you can request them by filling in our evaluation form at the end of the session. And there is a section there that you can provide us with your email address and we can email them over to you. Zoom will automatically share the link to the survey when you actually leave the webinar, but what we'll do is we will also post the link in the chat box at the end of the webinar just before the Q&A section. And the evaluation survey will also give you a chance to provide your feedback on the value of this webinar, which we really appreciate. Please do use the Q&A box throughout the webinar to post any questions you might have. You can also upvote any existing questions or anything you particularly want to see answered by using the thumbs up icon. Now, this part of the webinar isn't going to be included in the recording shared on YouTube, so you'll have to please just bear with me because I'm going to do an official recording now, and we do hope that you all enjoy the session. Welcome everyone to the latest in a series of development and support webinars delivered by the NIHR Academy. My name is Sarah Howarth and I work in the NIHR Academy as the Development and Support Manager. This webinar, Designing a Team Day, is delivered in collaboration between the NIHR Academy and Capfinity, our Leadership Development Programme partners. This webinar will be facilitated by Jane Kemp. Jane has extensive experience in facilitation, coaching and presenting, and is passionate about helping people and teams to achieve their full potential. Jane, I'm going to hand over to you now to deliver this content.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to have you join us today. So, as Sarah said, I've spent the last 25 years developing team days, facilitating team days, and really making sure that teams are getting the maximum out of those days. So, just to recap, as Sarah said, there's going to be a live Q&A at the end of the session. So we'll have approximately 15 minutes. So please do submit any questions as we're going through, and we will make sure we have the time at the end of the session to answer any of those questions. If you want to vote on them, give them the thumbs up. If there's a question in there that you think is a brilliant question that you would like to know the answer to, please do give it a thumbs up. So team days, as we're now working in a hybrid way, are opportunities to engage with each other, are opportunities to be face-to-face, are less frequent. So we want to make sure that they are as valuable as possible. So when we are all together face-to-face, how do we make sure that we're achieving our purpose and getting as much value out of it as possible? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So guidance on how to design that day. 3 key areas that we're going to cover off in this webinar. First of all, how do I get started? What's my starting point? I know we're all together in 2 weeks' time, or in a month's time, or in 6 months' time. Where do we start? Second thing, what makes that session engaging and interactive? How can I ensure that everybody who's participating is interacting, being heard, has got the space that they need to be able to share their thoughts and is engaged? Final thing, evaluation, feedback. So as Sarah just mentioned, there will be an opportunity to give feedback at the end of this session. How do we make sure in our face-to-face sessions that we've met our objective? How can we measure that success? So we'll take these 3 sections in turn, and we're going to start off with that, how do I get started? So if we think about it, let's use the analogy of going on a holiday, going on a break. Before I can start my packing and I know what it is that I want to take, and I know what I need to take, I need to first of all think about the why, think about the where. So where is it that I'm planning to go? So if we take these two visuals in order, we first of all need to pick our destination, then I can start planning. So thinking about this in terms of a team day, the first question is, why are we getting together? Why are we meeting? What is it that we're hoping to achieve? Once I know that, I can then start filling in all the different pieces and thinking about, well, who, what is it we're going to do? When are we going to do the different sections? So it's starting from that why. Without a clear reason, we can go off course. It can feel a bit aimless. It could feel, well, why are we meeting? So the why could be anything from to share information, to work out how we work as a team, to get people on board, to get people brainstorming, coming up with different or new ideas. So that is the first step. Why are we meeting? What's the purpose of the day? And in order to have that, we can then from there design and plan an effective day. We can scope it out. 3 questions or 3 words that can help right at the start of that planning process are, what do I want my audience to think? So as a result of us being together for these 3 hours, for this full day, what do I want people to think? What do I want people to feel as a result of it? And then finally, what do I want people to do? So if we were to take the example of we're introducing a new IT system, or we've got a new IT system coming up. At the end of the day, what do I want people to think? I want people to think, this is usable, I understand it, I could train my team on it. What do I want them to feel? Excited that they know how to use it? Ready? What do I want them to do? I want them to use it. I want them to return to their work environment and be ready to log on, to be ready to give this a go. Equally, if it's an idea generation session, at the end of the day, what do I want people to think, having generated all these ideas? I want them to think we've got lots of possibilities. We've got some brilliant ideas and we know what we're taking ahead. I want them to feel energized. I want them to feel excited about the ideas that we're choosing to progress. What do I want them to do? Those next steps, those actions to making sure that this happens. So it's a really good place to start. What do I want to be different at the end of the day? What do I want people to think, feel, and do as a result of this intervention? So we've thought about why. We thought about why are we doing this? What do I want to be different as a result of doing this? The next thing is to think about who's going to be in the room. Who am I inviting to this? So one size fits all versus one size doesn't fit anyone. We need to think, and sometimes there can be a bit of tension between different people's needs. We've all got different needs that we might be bringing to that event. So some of us might be extrovert. I'm happy talking in plenary. I'm happy to speak up in front of the group. Some of us might be introvert. We'd prefer to have a bit more time to reflect, time speaking in smaller groups rather than in front of the whole group. So it's important to think about when we're designing our day, who have I got coming to this? How am I going to fit to match people's different needs? It's also worth recognizing as the designer of the day, there are always going to be situations. We're going to have to make some judgment calls as well that might not meet everybody's needs. I was running a session recently and it was in London, and we had people from mainland Europe, people from Scotland, people from north of England, and there was a question, why is this in London? Great question, why is it in London? And I was with the client, and it's kind of, well, first of all, this is where we can get the space. Secondly, we're inviting senior speakers, and this is where the senior speakers were working on this week. So there will sometimes be calls that we need to make that might not meet everyone's needs. But if we can start off by thinking about the basics, what are people's needs in this session? And so if we just look at a brief hierarchy of needs in terms of those attending the face-to-face session, we start at the bottom. First off, are people going to have access to the right equipment? Do people have chairs at their desks? If there's a projector, do people need a projector? What are the things that we need in order to make this to make this work. So just thinking about those basic needs, breakout spaces it might be, prayer spaces for prayer. What are the things that we need? Also thinking about when is it that this session is falling. Opportunity to contribute. And as I said, depending on whether we're introverted, whether we're extroverted, we might all like to contribute in different ways. So some of us in front of a whole group, other people might need more time to reflect and to think quietly, maybe an opportunity to contribute anonymously. So I can put post-it notes into a box to add my questions, add my thoughts. Is there space built into the plan for people to pause, for people to reflect? So some of the best ideas we come up with can be in that quiet time in between. Have we got the space for people to do that? Have we built in breaks? Have we acknowledged that we're all going to have those ebbs and flows in our concentration and our energy? Have we built in the time for the breaks? Final thing that's really important when planning your day, is there flex? Is there space for us to carry on a really good conversation? Have we got that time in the agenda? Can we be agile? If something's not working, can I get rid of that and add in something else? So just making sure there's some space in there for us to be able to flex it as and when we need to. So we've thought about why we're doing this. We've thought about what we want to be different at the end of it, what we want people to get out of it. We've started to think about who's going to be in the room, who's going to be attending. We can then start to scope it out. Now, the scope is more detailed than an agenda, but it is not as detailed as the detailed notes. So it's somewhere in between. So something like this, for example, a chart. So what are the timings? What's the flow? What's going to happen? What's the objective of each of these different sections? The objective is really important because we can go through each of these different exercises, each of these different sections and say, is it meeting my overall objective? If it is, keep it in. If it's not, can we get rid of it? What else could we do instead? So with the timing, building contingency timing, things never go quite according to plan. So is there a bit of time to allow for a great discussion? If there's a really good discussion, a great idea that's come up on something, have I got a bit of flex? Is there a bit of time? So ideally with our agenda, don't overload it. Because if we overload it, we're setting ourselves up for failure. There's too much in there. It's too much that we need to achieve. So make sure it's realistic and there is a bit of extra time in there. Okay, so that's our broad scope for the day. So starting from here. So in terms of getting started, just this first section, 3 things. 1, what do I want people to take away from it? Why am I doing this? Then from there, we can think about who's coming to this and what are their needs? Does the space allow for different people's needs? Have I thought about it in terms of the different ways that we're going to interact, the different activities? Is there opportunities for people to reflect? Equally, for people who want to talk in and come up with ideas in plenary, are there those opportunities for them as well? And then from there, we can build that basic scope, which we can then flesh out and add more detail to, but making sure that we've got a bit of time in there. So if we need to, how can we make sure there's time to flex? Okay, from here, we can then take it into thinking about how can I bring this to life? I've got a scope. I know why I'm doing it. I know who's coming. How do I make it engaging and interactive? So we will notice this. Our energy ebbs and flows throughout the day, throughout a 90-minute session, throughout this 1-hour session. You will notice our energy going up and down. And there have been lots of studies looking at our different energy levels. Research tends to say that on average, every sort of 7 minutes, we might have a lapse in our attention. So there will be that initial sort of settling in, then we might have a little bit of a lapse, and then we'll come back into focus again. And then there might be a bit more of a lapse. And there are different activities we can do that can have an impact in terms of switching that attention back on again. So we need a mix of different pace, of different interactivity to make sure that we're trying to maintain that energy level where we can. So key elements, let's look at some of the different things that we can do to try and maintain those energy levels. It tends to be when we're designing a day or a webinar or whatever, there can tend to be 3 key different modes. So one can be tell. This is where we're imparting information, whether that's about an idea, whether that's about a new system, whether that's about a challenge. It might be us sharing the research that we've done to date. Alternatively, it could be a do, so it could be an exercise. Go away and find out about this, or in a small group, work on this particular thing. Or the final way that we can do it could be reflect. Okay, let's each take some time to reflect on how that particular new system might impact us. What might be some of the challenges? What might be some of the benefits of it? So there are 3. So there could be tell, do, reflect. So let's look at how we can use those at different points to try and maintain that those energy levels. So to start off with, where people are settling in, we're sitting back, we've got over that initial, I've met everyone, but then we might have that drop in energy. That's where you can introduce an icebreaker. So if people don't know each other, an opportunity to break the ice. It could be it could be a physical activity, it could be talking to somebody, getting to know somebody, walking around the room, sharing your thoughts. Then we've got that next drop. That might be where instead of another tell, so me talking at people for 5-10 minutes, a group exercise. Okay, this is the challenge. Go away in your group, find out about it. Again, it raises the energy up because people are talking, people are researching. And then maybe in that dip later on in our session, that might be where we want a bit of reflection. So it's the quieter time. So it is lower energy, but it's giving people that opportunity to reflect. What are my thoughts on this? What do I think about this? Which of these ideas do I think are the right one to take forward? And then finishing on a high, what's the energizer we could do at the end? So just looking for some of those different exercises to raise the energy up as people are leaving. So it's really worth, when we're thinking about the day that we've got, think about how do I manage people's energy? If there are going to be those dips, those peaks and troughs throughout the day, how can I match the exercises or mismatch the exercises to bring people's energy up? Other thing to think about is using interaction to engage people. So how can I use interaction to get people engaged, to help to raise those energy levels again? So on the left-hand side, we've got some of the traditional things that we might do. So it might just be let me share this slide deck. I've got 40 PowerPoint slides. I'm going to share these. Chances are the energy will be significantly lower versus here's the challenge we're facing. Can you go off, find out, research it for yourselves? What can you find out? Then when people come back, we can get them to debrief it. It means we start to hear many different voices rather than just potentially the one voice at the front. Another tool that we could use rather than open discussion, let's talk about this as a whole group, or 50 of us or 10 of us share it. You could do a pair and share. This is sometimes really effective if we notice that maybe only certain people in the group are sharing, or certain people might be much less comfortable sharing in front of the whole group. If we put people into pairs, give them a question, give them a challenge, give them something to explore, and then say, just manage those expectations. Everyone's going to have 5 minutes. At the end of those 5 minutes, I'd like each pair to share an idea or an action. And it means that it might feel much more comfortable coming back and sharing as a smaller group. Equally, everybody gets to talk, everybody gets to be heard. If we're trying to make these days together as valuable as possible, we want everyone to be heard. There is many more opportunities to be heard in a pair than there is in a larger group. Walkthrough of an idea versus an experiential activity. Recently, I was trying to explain to a client the power of virtual reality coaching, and I was trying to talk them through it. And I was explaining what happened. So you put this headset on, you go off into this world. And I could see it just wasn't coming across the way I was trying to explain it. So I said, well, let's give it a go. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So factoring that in, let's experience what it is that we're talking about and go, I get this. Instantly, the energy level goes up, the interaction goes up. It might not be virtual reality coaching, but how do we get people to experience what we're talking about rather than just walking through the idea? If it's for a new system, new software, opportunity to demonstrate it. If it's for a new idea, how might we experience that? Sharing data, instead of just sharing it, how can we bring it to life? So it might be through using a quiz. It might be through using something like Slido or Mentimeter. I'd highly recommend using either of those. I think they work brilliantly on virtual sessions. They also work really well on face-to-face sessions. So if you've got a big group of people and you're doing a Mentimeter, so with Mentimeter, you bring up the code, everyone uses it on their mobile phone, and they get to share their thoughts on the question that's on screen. And you can see all the answers coming up live in front of you. So it makes it really interactive, but equally the benefit is it's anonymous. So for those of us who might not feel so confident sharing our ideas in front of everybody, they're coming up there anonymously. So look, how can we bring the data to life? How can we gamify it? The other thing is tell stories. What stories do you have? We're used to hearing stories, so bringing things to life through a good narrative, a good story. So it's just looking at thinking about people's energy throughout the session, thinking about how do I build in as much interaction as possible so that I can keep people involved, keep people engaged, and make sure that I'm hearing from different people. We have different preferences, we have different ways we prefer interacting. How do I try and make it as accessible for people as possible? Final thing just to think about is thinking about designing for inclusion. So we want to create a safe space where everybody feels happy to contribute. So it's really important that there is that psychological safety. So if I come up with an idea, someone's not going to roll their eyes or shut it down. I don't have to worry about whether somebody is perceiving it to be silly or a wrong idea. So thinking about how do we create that environment so it feels safe for everybody to contribute. So we can say something at the start like, all ideas are welcome. And so you put your hand up and you say, yeah, I've got this idea. And I might then say something like, oh, yeah, I'm going to park that for now. I don't think that's entirely relevant. So there's a contradiction in what I'm saying and therefore how I'm behaving. So just watching out for those hidden messages. Those hidden messages might be coming from me as the facilitator, as the leader of the session, or it could be coming from other people. So we're aiming to design for inclusion. So just notice what are any of those hidden messages that might be being communicated unconsciously, might be with the best intention. I'm trying to keep it on track, but instantly I've shut down something. I've made it feel less safe to contribute. So there are a couple of things that we can do that just might help us in terms of making sure that we're building an inclusive session. The first one, ground rules. Now, no one likes to start with a whole load of rules, but what we can do is we can co-create this. So it's exciting. We're all here together for the next 3 hours, for the next day, for the next 2 days. Can we just agree together some ground rules? How are we going to be with each other? How are we going to interact? I'd highly recommend that you write them up together as a group, and they will vary depending on what the session is, but hopefully they include things like, staying focused, not multitasking, listening to each other, making sure that we encourage everybody to be heard. Once we've set these ground rules, we can then refer back to them. So if we notice later on in the day that we've shut somebody down or that we haven't let somebody finish before we've interrupted, call it out. It could also be later on in the day, we might say, oh, let's just have a reminder. What were the ground rules that we shared? I'm pointing here because it's my imaginary flip chart that we've written them up on. So let's just refer back to the ground rules. It might be that we need a refresher, we notice, after the break, after lunch, just to keep us focused. So that's the first one. ground rules. Let's agree to that together as a team. What are we committing to each other? Then the second thing that can help us is allowing for individual preferences. So we all think and process differently. So we need to recognize these differences and design the session accordingly. So some people, if for example, if we're extroverted, and this is, none of us is entirely one thing or another. So these are just, we'll look at just sort of a couple of definitions. So if we were extroverted, we might be more externally focused. We might be very happy to speak out and to think out loud and to share responses in a wider group. If I'm more introverted, actually, I might like to incubate. I might like to think about it, and being put on the spot instantly to share my ideas might not be the best way to get the best out of me. And equally, it might not make me feel really comfortable. So actually, if you can design into there opportunities and time for me to reflect, think about it. So I was running a group day last week, and I noticed that every time, the group knew each other, but every time we sent a group out a question out into open discussion, out of a group of 12, there were probably three people who felt happy to speak in front of that group. For everybody else, it was much better to have an opportunity to think about it, to discuss it, and then come back and share thoughts. So it's flexing it and noticing, who's your group? What do you think is going to work for them? And actually, have I built in enough interactivity in different activities so that people can have that opportunity to speak out loud if they want to, but equally, there's the opportunity for people to go, oh, let me think about that. I need to think about it. I need to reflect. Maybe I need to do a bit of research on it, or I need to discuss it with somebody. I'd like to be able to discuss it. I'd like to be able to think about it in a small group, and then we will come back and then we will talk about it. So we need to make sure we're building in a mix of different interactivity within that session. A model to help us to do this, so it's called the divergent convergent model, and it builds in different ways of interacting. So we can have those bigger interactions as a whole group, but we can also have those smaller moments and times of reflection. So I'll take you through, there are 5 steps. I'll go through each stage one by one. And if you have any questions as we're going through, as Sarah said, please do just put them in the Q&A box and we can come back to them at the end of the session. So the first stage, so this is the idea generation stage. So at this point, we're coming up with all the ideas. So this is really where, when we're thinking about the ground rules, at the idea generation stage, there is no bad idea. So just at the moment here, at this point, we're thinking about the quantity of ideas, because later on we'll look at quality. So it's generating ideas. So this could be writing the ideas down on post-it notes. This could be working in smaller groups. This could be a walk and think for people, depending on how people work. So just different ways to generate new ideas, to come up with ideas. And we want to, at that point, we want to be capturing all of those ideas. So whether it's on a Chromebook, whether it's on a post-it note, whether it is on a flip chart, however it is. Stage 2, this is where we're bringing all the ideas together. So this is when we're back again in a group and we are looking for duplicates. So if it's on post-it notes, we can group them together. Where are the duplicates? And at stage 2, the idea is build. It's building on those ideas that we've already got, building on the thoughts that we have. So it's expanding out any of those existing ideas that we have. It is still in there, no bad idea. Let's keep building, let's keep building it up, thinking about those Lego blocks, not knocking it down. Stage 3 is where we're individually, you're thinking, how would you group the different ideas? So my recommendation at this point would be we do it silently. So silently, you're going through and you're thinking, okay, how would I group those different ideas? What are my thoughts on those different ideas? The reason for doing this individually here is it can avoid groupthink. It can avoid some of us being swayed by the loudest voice in the room. There might be an idea that I might have come up with it, or somebody else might have come up with it, but I think it's brilliant. And so therefore, unconsciously or consciously, I'm going to try and persuade other people. And so we could all be led in one direction. If we do stage 3 silently, it means that each of us individually is coming up with our own thoughts. What we can then do is go on to stage 4. And stage 4, once you've got the top ideas, so stage 3, individually we're doing it, we're bringing out the key ideas, sharing that back as a group. Stage 4, we rank them 1 to 5. So we've got these 5 top ideas. I would like individually everybody to rank them 1 to 5. And that could be just, we put sticky notes on them, or you just choose, maybe we've got 20 ideas at this stage. Choose your top 5. And so each person gets to be heard, each person gets to rank their top 5 ideas, which allows us to whittle it down. So in stage 3, we might have had more ideas. By stage 4, we'll be left with five ideas, the top that we can then choose, pick out the top ideas, which ones were coming as the top. So if you do the 1 to 5 ranking, you'll have 5 is the best, your total number of points, with 1 down to lowest, which means that if everybody does this, you might want to do it in table form, bring it all together. It means that you can see which one's your top idea. So for here, we had idea 1 coming out as number 1, and idea 3 coming out as number 2. Benefit being everybody has had an opportunity to do this. So everybody's had an opportunity to be heard and to get their points over. Okay, so this is the divergent convergent model as an approach, which allows for different ways of thinking, allows for different levels of interactivity, and allows for everybody to have the opportunity to input in a way that they feel comfortable inputting. So, final step in this, structured discussion. We've got our top 1, 2 ideas, then actually discussing it as a group. What are the actions? How are we going to take this forward? What are the next steps? Who's going to be doing which parts? What do we agree on? And so again, that's coming back into that whole group discussion. It might be in the whole group discussion, you notice that's not working. So how do we divide it up? Split it into pairs, or maybe smaller groups. If you've got a very big group, you might want groups of 3, groups of 4. If you could discuss part 1, you'll discuss idea number 2. Let's come back. Let's see where we've got to. So it could be done as an entire group, but it is definitely group discussion, or it could be done as smaller groups if you notice that's what's working better for your team. So in summary, think about, we've got the scope from stage 1. Think about your energy plan. What do you notice? So I notice every single time without fail, there is a huge slump in energy in the afternoon. So I would start any afternoon session with an icebreaker. I would start after we go for a break, I would start that with an icebreaker again, because we get back, we get comfy in our seats. So actually, how do you increase the energy again? So just look for some of the different icebreakers that we might be able to use. See how you can counter those highs and lows. If you notice there's a lot of tell and the energy seems to be dropping, how could you make that more interactive? Could you add in a quiz? Could you add in a research this, come back to me with your ideas? If you notice that people aren't speaking in the entire group, or people aren't being heard, look for opportunities, look for ways to include people. Another thing I find really great is you get people to write an idea on a piece of paper, put it all in the middle, shuffle it up, other people bring it out, other people then own that idea. Just means it can share and we can make sure that everyone's being heard. So just vary the different types of interaction. Is it full group? Is it an exercise? Is it pairs? Is it individual, solo reflection? So that we can just think of creative ways to make sure that everybody feels safe and feels able to input. So I'd highly recommend the rules, what are our guidelines, or what are we committed to each other today? So think about those, and then we can refer back to them, act as a reminder as and when we need to, but just make sure that we're creating that environment where everybody feels equal. The ideas can come from anywhere, the contributions can come from everybody, and making sure that everybody feels that they're able to contribute in a safe environment. Final section for us to look at, did it work? So right at the start of this, we talked about scoping it out, and we talked about thinking about, why are we having this day? What's the purpose? What do I want people to think? What do I want people to feel? What do I want people to do as a result of being together and having this face-to-face team day? So at the end of it, we need to see, did we achieve it? So getting some sort of feedback, finding out, was it a success? So how do we know? How do we know if it's worked or not? So there are different ways we can measure it, and it depends on the day. So 3 broad measurements: reactions, were the group engaged? So you can ask people, could be a quick survey. Did you enjoy this? Did it meet your needs? The problem sometimes with reaction, I'd be interested to know your thoughts and we can discuss this further, is different people vary. So there can be, I notice, there can be huge cultural differences. So for example, I will have a couple of clients who will send out questionnaires at the end, and it will be, would you rate this as excellent, very good, good, adequate, poor? Depending on where in the world I'm working, the norms can be really different. So I notice if I'm working in, this is my personal experience, I notice when I'm working in Germany, it's more likely to be good. When I'm working in other countries, there might be, so in the UK, much more likely to get a very good, potentially, or an excellent. When I'm working, I've noticed this as well with feedback. When we're giving maybe feedback to our managers, the difference between working in South America and North America. So in South America, much more likely to be very positive, this is my personal experience, very positive feedback, excellent manager. And then potentially sometimes when I'm working with clients, groups in New York, it could be, yeah, they're good. There's still room for improvement. So that's the danger if we just get that first piece of feedback. If I just get the reactions, obviously it depends on cultural differences, depends on individual differences as well. So the importance of impact. Did we achieve what we set out to achieve? So if we go back to that think, feel and do, what was it that I was aiming to achieve? So if we go back to that, we can think about, did we achieve that? And this can be done via a Kahoot. It might be done via a quiz afterwards. So you can check what's the level of knowledge. If I'm talking to people about a new system, I could do a quiz on it. Have people got the level of knowledge that I'm expecting? What have people picked up? What haven't they potentially picked up? It could be a survey monkey that goes out to people so that you can find out, did we achieve what we set out to achieve? Final piece is the results. What has it changed? Have we achieved what we wanted to? What has changed? In order to do this, this might need to be more qualitative. This might need to be a more in-depth discussion. So finding out, if, for example, we're doing a session all about team building, we're trying to bring the team closer together. 2 months down the line, we could do some interviews. What changed? What did you notice? What was the difference? What were the benefits that you got out of that day? Just to really find out, what is it that's changed? It might need to be a while after the survey, because we might not instantly see, a while after the event, so we might not instantly see that change, maybe taking a while. A few rules of thumb. If you're going to include a survey, my advice would be, having spent years encouraging people to complete surveys and feedback, do it and allow time for it in the session. If you ask people to do it after they've left, once we've left, we've already forgotten. We've moved on. I'm thinking about my train trip home. I'm thinking about the meeting I've got at 6 o'clock this evening. We've forgotten. So our best bet is to incorporate time into the session for people to give feedback. So at the end of that face-to-face session, here's a couple of questionnaires, or it might be some questions via Mentimeter on screen. It could be some questions via Slido that we can complete, or it could be a link to a survey. There might be a QR code that comes up at the end. We scan that on our phone, we can complete the survey. Keep it to around 10 questions maximum. Any more than that, you won't do it. My advice would be ideally 3 to 5 questions. Use multiple choice, make it as easy as possible to get that feedback. If you include 1, 2 open-ended questions, then we might be able to get those sort of that deeper insight. Share the survey at the end. Sarah did this at the start. She said there's going to be a survey at the end. She told us how it was going to be shared. So be as explicit as possible and be realistic about how long it's going to take. It's going to be approximately 4 minutes of your time. This is how we're going to use it. It would be really useful to get it. So that's the final section. Getting the feedback, getting the evaluation. Have we been successful? That evaluation is essential for us to know, well, what might I do differently next time? What might I add? What might I change? So thank you very much for attending the session. I'm going to hand back to Sarah in a minute, and we're going to take any of the questions. I can see some questions coming in the Q&A, some coming into the chat box, but there's also further areas. So if you want to explore any of this any further, there are some additional tools. So the first one, the Lightning Decision Jam. So this is supporting the core principles of design sprints. So it helps us to make faster decisions. World Cafe is a great process that I've used with everybody from publishers to coming up with new ideas for fruit and vegetable manufacturers, so everything. World Cafe, you agree 3 questions as a team. These are the 3 questions you want to focus on. You then split people into 3 teams. You have a table host. That's the person who takes notes. I've seen it done really well where you have the table is covered in a large piece of paper so everybody can write at the table when they're there. People then rotate round apart from the table host. The table host is there to share the ideas of the previous group, but also to get the ideas of the next group. So you get that real cross-pollination of ideas. You debrief after each question, move around. 6 thinking hats. This comes from Edward de Bono. The 6 thinking hats, again, it's a lovely idea to get us thinking differently. So if you were to type that into a search engine, you'll get the different coloured hats. So green might be I'm idea generating. Black might be I'm looking for the negatives. Red might be I'm looking for what currently works with this. So it forces us just to think differently. So you could get everybody to move from hat to hat, or you could get different people in the room to wear different hats so we can challenge our thinking and look at it from different perspectives. Other resources, there's the Prince's Trust PDF, which has got lots of different resources, all the different icebreakers. There are some brilliant icebreakers. 2 that I would share. One is get 2 people face to face. This is quite a nice one for after lunch when the energy is a bit low and we're all feeling a bit full up and we're trying to digest. 2 people facing each other. We then turn back to back. One of us changes 3 things about us. So anything. We then face each other again. We have to notice what's different, what's changed. It just wakes our mind up. It gets us thinking differently. It's also interesting when we go back to our seat, we revert back to exactly the same as before and just thinking. So that's a nice one. The other one is get 2 people, or it could be 2 or 3 people. They have to find something in common. And the more different it is, the better. So 2, 3 people, get them chatting. It's a real opportunity to get to know somebody. So, and you're going beyond the obvious. So beyond we're both human, beyond we both work at the same organisation, beyond we're both interested in this. I've had people before who've attended the same football tournament in North Wales, and we were running this session, I think in Birmingham. So, and they'd have attended it as kids, but through those questions, they'd found out. Evaluation resources, I would highly recommend face-to-face or virtually using things like Mentimeter, Kahoot. There's another one called Slido where you can bring in questions. They all have free versions, so have a look at them. And it means you can gamify it, you can add to that interaction. So I'm now going to welcome Sarah back in. And Sarah, do we have any questions?
Hi Jane, yes we do. So thank you for delivering such an interesting session. We do really hope that everyone's found it interesting and insightful. So I'm now going to open up the Q&A. There's still time if you want to send in your questions by clicking on the Q&A button, Or if you want to upvote the ones you particularly want to see answered, we'll be asking those first. Just click on the thumbs icon. So Jane, let's have a look. Okay, so we've got 6 questions so far, and I'll
Brilliant.
start off with the one with the most upvotes. So this one is, do you have any tips for a day where the purpose is to get a team of people together who don't know each other very well?
Oh, great question. Okay, so my advice for that one would be do spend as much time as possible getting to know each other in smaller groups. So if you're getting lots of people together, obviously there will be the sharing of the rules and the guidelines together, but actually you then need to allow time for people to actually get to know each other. And particularly in a large group, we might really feel, I don't really want to be talking in front of everybody. So as many icebreaker, I would start with an icebreaker. I think that icebreaker about find something you have in common with somebody you don't really know is a lovely one for getting people. The only way you can uncover something unusual is asking lots of questions and listening. So where did you grow up? What do you work on? What do you like doing? So people get to know each other. So as much as possible, my advice would be get people working in small groups, debriefing back, and you mix up those groups each time. So mix up the groups so people are working with different people each time and then sharing back in front of the whole group. Icebreakers as well. Look at the Prince's Trust PDF on icebreakers. Find the ones you like. You'll use some and you'll think, oh, that didn't go according to plan. But the ones that you like, use those ones.
Fab, thank you, Jane. So we've got a few more questions coming in. So I'll go to the next ones that I've got the most upvotes. This is a short and snappy one. Mm-hmm. Inclusion, how do you manage derailers?
Oh, derailers as in people who are, I presume, so I'm going to assume what you mean here, but please do let me know if I'm getting it wrong. So this is where I think having the ground rules is really helpful. So I think having the ground rules really helps us, and you can, because actually this is what we've all agreed to do. I do think as well, if there's a derail, if we have an opportunity, if we notice somebody is actively derailing it, having a conversation with them. I was taught when I started training and running group sessions about 15 years ago, somebody told me to run at the cynic. So the person who you notice isn't on board and who is derailing it, go and spend. Our tendency might be to run away from that person, but actually go and chat to that person. What do we notice? What do we find out? Why are they derailing it? There's probably a reason they're doing it. And I guess just encouraging. Also, sometimes I've noticed I was running a big group session and it was all about presentation skills. And there was somebody who was derailing it. And actually I worked out they needed a role, they needed a job. So I got them to be my counterpart. And we split the group into 2 and they ran one half of it and they were fantastic once they had a role. So I'd try and understand why. Where's it coming from? Why are they derailing? I'd also go back to the rules of engagement. What do we agree as a team? But actually just sort of trying to, our tendency when someone's being challenging potentially might be to run away, but I'd encourage us to find out what's going on.
That is interesting. I could probably talk about that for longer, but we'll probably get back to the questions actually. Next question. Would you always recommend sharing the agenda with the group in advance? What if you want to keep some of it a surprise?
Oh, yeah, another brilliant question. Okay, so what you could do, I personally think it's really useful to share the agenda in advance, because if we go back to the different thinking styles, different processing styles, some of us really need to know and manage our expectations. Most of us, when we struggle with change, it's because we're dealing with uncertainty. So if there's uncertainty, I'm turning up for a day and I don't know what's expected of me, I don't know what's going to happen, I could feel really out of my comfort zone. So I'm starting off maybe from a defensive point of view. So by sharing the agenda in advance, I've got a broad idea of what's happening. It doesn't need to be too detailed. It could be, these are the 5 key areas. This is what we're dealing with. If there is something in there which we want to keep as a surprise, we could say surprise guest or guest speaker. I don't need to tell you who it is, but I'm just going to say there's going to be a guest speaker or there's going to be a surprise event, more to be found out on the day. So I think hopefully therefore that gets the balance of meeting different people's needs. So people know as much as they need to, but we can also keep back the things we want to keep as a surprise.
Yeah, I think that's a good balance. Next one, this one's got 3 upvotes. Do you have any recommendations for icebreaker activities that more introverted people may feel more comfortable engaging with?
Ooh, that's a great idea. Great thing. So other ice-breaking activities that we can do that might feel more comfortable. So different ones. And I think, so there could be something which is, so a group I'm working with next week, and I'm aware that some people in the group are, I would definitely say there are quite a few people in the group are more introverted. I've given them a piece of pre-work, which is to just do a poster about what they're happy to share about themselves on the poster. So rather than somebody having to stand up and introduce themselves, I've given them the opportunity to just do an A4 poster. And when I say poster, I'm not expecting any sort of graphic design whizzes. It can be you borrow a felt tip and you draw a little bit about yourself. So this is about sharing their strengths, their weaknesses, their skills, and their knowledge. So I've given people, you can do that on the day. You can do that on the day. So it's a solo activity. Then we put it up on the wall. Everybody's happy to share. And so you only have to share what you're happy to share. You could also do that about ideas. Which of these ideas do you like? Something else that works quite well is a box in the center of the table. So if we're more introverted, you can put ideas into that box, whether that's about you, whether that's about the ideas, whether that's about the challenge. You can just put them on pieces of paper. When I'm working with large groups, if there's a Q&A, I will put a box at the front of the room and say, this is Q&A. Put your questions in here anonymously, though you don't have to be called on to talk about them. I will read them out to the speakers. So it gives an opportunity to contribute, but not having to contribute and be in the spotlight. I think the other thing, introverts, is if we're more introverted, can be working in pairs, can feel much more comfortable, and then you debrief per pair. So you share back as a pair. This is what we were discussing. This was our thought. So I think there are lots of activities that can make it much more comfortable, whether that's doing it anonymously, whether that is working in a pair, or whether that's pre-work or work on the day. Let's put it up on a poster. Hopefully that answered that one with some thoughts.
Fab, I think it did. We've got another 5 questions and about 6 or 7 minutes. So we'll see how many we get through, but we might not be able to answer them all right now.
Go for it. I'll go quickly.
So I'll just go from the top. Actually, no, there's another introvert question, so I'm going to go to that one first.
Mm-hmm.
If I know my team are all introverts, does that mean I should only focus on introverted activities?
Okay, so that's an interesting one. I don't think I think we're quite complicated, us humans, and I might have days when I'm very extrovert, and there might be days when I'm much more introvert, particularly depending on the week and depending on what I've been doing. I think we can accommodate for that. I think we can build in some flex. But what if, for example, a couple of the people in the room were extroverts? So I would aim to make it a combination of different activities. If you're pretty sure, so thinking about the team I'm working with next week, I'm pretty sure that the majority are introverted, but they're not all introverted. So I do need to make it so that it is also a safe space if you're extroverted to be able to think out loud. So I would still recommend building in a combination. You might want to bias the activities towards people who are introverted, but make sure there's opportunity as well if you're extroverted.
I'm going to group these next 2 questions together because they're both asking for specific activities.
Okay.
The first one, are there any particular activities you'd recommend to encourage networking that aren't speed dating networking? And secondly, any activities that you can suggest for reflection sessions?
Okay, reflection sessions. I think so. Reflection sessions, give people questions, so 1 or 2 questions, write them in advance on a flip chart, write them in advance on a slide, and then give people 5 minutes, for example, to sit there quietly and note down their thoughts. So that could be one for reflection, or it could be a walk and talk. So walk and talks work really nicely and change the energy. Give people 10 minutes to go for a walk, is if there is space and if that's possible. That might not be possible. So if it is possible for your audience, so either give people a couple of questions, think about it, and then come back. And also what you can use the pair and share. So solo think about it for 2 minutes, pair and share for 2 minutes, and then debrief back to the whole group, or a walk and talk if possible. Networking and not speed dating. That's a challenging one, isn't it? I think you can, I mean, I would encourage in terms of the networking, I think networking, if you're doing a team day, you mix people up as much as you possibly can in order to network. You share strengths about yourself, you find out about other people. So it's not speed dating. So actually you get to have a bit of you get to meet people, but it's more of a meaningful meeting than I think that's the problem with speed dating. I might remember your name. I might remember your the first thing you said about me. I think another thing that for networking that's quite nice is get people to introduce each other, to meet each other, and then you get them to introduce each other back in plenary. That's something I always do personally, and obviously I do this for a living. I still hate the being put on the spot and being told to introduce myself. I'd much rather introduce Sarah and Sarah introduce me. So I think that's quite a nice networking way as well. You get to find out about each other. I've actually got to listen.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, actually, with the sessions I've been to.
Yeah, I much prefer that.
Right, next question. What do you do when the energy in the room is low, but you need to get through a lot of telling?
First of all, I personally would probably call it out. So I will call out the fact that it's really, I noticed the energy has dropped. We've still got quite a bit of information to share, but I'm going to break it up. So I'm going to break up the information. So what we're going to do is there's going to be, I would also probably try and include in at that point, I would actively be looking for how do I include interaction. So that may entirely be where I'll say, okay, we're going to do 10 minutes and it's going to be sharing information. I'm going to be asking you to think of questions to ask me at the end of the 10 minutes, or there's going to be a Mentimeter coming up at the end of the 10 minutes. I want you to add in the key things you've taken out of that Mentimeter. So I have a session which is exactly as you're talking about there, where the afternoon session is a lot of tell. I've run it about 3 times and I'm working out that I have to add in Q&A, but Q&A where I've kind of planted the questions in people at the start of it. So I've said, I'm going to be telling you about this. I want your questions on this at the end of it. I've also had to add in interactivity in terms of things like Mentimeter, and I've added in interactivity in terms of moving where people are sitting. So if you know you've got it coming up and you've noticed the energy has dropped, I would call it out. I would say, I noticed. The other thing, this is where air conditioning can be our friend. In the afternoon session, everyone coming and go, oh, it's cold. Yeah, that's so we don't fall asleep. But yeah, I would call it out and I would actively try and make sure you think about it in chunks. If you think if 7 minutes is our average that we can stay concentrating for, how can you make sure that there's a question or there's an interactivity? And that interactivity might be chat to the person next to you about what you've just heard. What are your thoughts on it? And then we call out a few people.
Fabulous, thank you. We've got one question left, so I am going to read it just for the person that posted it. Can I ask, with a divergent convergent model, practically, how do you get everyone affinity grouping on their own? The ideas have just come in, so they are in one place. Do you use specific software for this type of task? With post-its, it will be hard, I imagine.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So I think, so what I tend to do is I tend to have a post-it wall, and I tend to have a whole wall where everything is there, but you have to make sure it's very spread out. I've done it before and it has gone exactly as you say, not very well, because it's all grouped in together. So I've never found a piece of software where it's worked really well. I will make sure everybody has their own pad and paper and pen, so that they can do it together, so they can individually, they can write it, do the affinity grouping by themselves. But you will have a wall, and along the wall, spread out, will be all the different ideas. If there is a piece of software that does this, I would love to know about it. But yeah, I recognize it's challenging, and it's particularly challenging if what normally happens initially is everybody puts everything in a very small space. So you need to make sure that it's spread out, whether that's people's posters or whether that is post-it notes. And there was a great point here, somebody mentioned, yeah, we did, Anaya said we did one at a previous organization where we drew ourselves, put it up on the wall, and then we just admired each other's artwork. So I think that goes all the way back to doing the posters. Again, with the posters, just make sure that we spread any of these things out, because otherwise it can be pretty difficult.
Wonderful. And Martin's just popped in the chat as well to say that Lucy's Spark is a really good bit of software and that can help with virtual meetings.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you. So we are 1 minute over, so apologies everybody. But just want to thank you again, Jane, and thank you everybody for attending this session. We really hope that everyone's found this webinar beneficial and that you feel able to implement some of these behaviours that we've explored today. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, for those of you that are joining us live, as we close this session, you'll be asked to complete a quick evaluation form, and the link is also available in the chat. Stacey's popped that in there. This will give you the opportunity to share your email address so you can receive a copy of the slides. And if you have time, please do provide us with your feedback. All of our past webinars can be found on the NIHR TV YouTube channel under the Development and Support Webinars playlist. And you will find a link to that in the box. What you'll also find links in the chat box to are our online leadership development resources. These are modular resources available on NIHR Learn, and they're available to everybody. And the NIHR Academy events page, so you can keep up to date with any up and coming events, webinars, workshops that we might be running. Once again, thank you for your time, and thank you, Jane, for delivering such a wonderful session. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you all again soon.